Hey, good beginning of the week. So this week we're going to talk about EFT, and the originator of that is Sue Johnson. This is one of those approaches that you can't really ignore because it has such great research. There's research that shows that it's 90% effective in helping people to change. So that's pretty impressive. So let's jump in with that.
Emotion focused therapy. So, emotion focused therapy has become one of the, like I mentioned, one of the leading empirically supported approaches to treating couples. It's also used with individuals. I I work mostly with couples, so I sort of think of it as a couples approach. It is designed specifically for couples, although versions of it are used effectively with individuals, with families. There's a whole video series for working with the LGBT community. And it's like I said, I think they said 70% uh, feel more calm after it. I might be saying the wording wrong, but 90% experience improvement when receiving this type of treatment, which is great. The roots of it are in experiential therapy, in person-centered therapy, systemic therapy, and attachment theory. I think you could think for licensure that maybe there would be a question about sort of the roots it draws on. So those are all important to know about. So all knowledge is experience. Everything else is just information. Um, Basically, and I don't know how much training you all have had. I'd be curious actually to hear how big it is at your particular university. There are camps of people who are really interested in this. If you haven't got training into it, it's one of the ones I think is worth your time to learn more about. EFT views couples distress as being maintained by absorbing negative affect. Um, I think about it. If you ever read the book Pragmatics of Human Communication, they say that couples can get stuck in, or individuals can get stuck in negative sentiment override, or positive sentiment override, which is just what it sounds like. It's like you start to filter everything through either a negative or a positive lens. And couples who are in distress are often stuck in a negative one. Absorbing negative affect both reflects and primes rigid, constricted patterns of interacted. People get into those places where I'm not going to change until they change, and so both of them are doing the same thing again and again, and it's really hard to. It feels really hard to get out of that. These patterns make the safe emotional engagement necessary for secure bonding almost impossible. Sometimes I will work with people just to get them to go do something that's not problem focused, because I'm trying to get them to a place that's um, not characterized just by negative emotions. That can be tricky. The goals of EFT are to access and to expand and reorganize key emotional responses. You could think of that as unique outcomes, unique solutions, other models, language, other ways. You're trying to find something that's working and and to expand it. And I do that all the time. So people will come in, they'll say, yeah, we fought almost every day this week. And I'll say, well, was there a day that you didn't fight? And they'll say, yeah, well, Sunday night we had a really good night. Well, what was different about Sunday night? And I'm much more interested in that. Create a shift in a partner's interactional positions. And if you think about the recursive pattern that we may have talked about a little bit earlier, if you can just get either side of the couple of the system to do something different, then it can change a range the direction in interactional patterns. And you want to foster the creation of a secure bond between partners through the creation of new interactional events that can redefine the relationship. A very common homework assignment, just a side story, is that I will tell people, okay, this week I want you to do one thing very small that you think your partner would experience as romantic or caring, but you can't tell them what it is. And then next week I'm going to ask you to try and guess what it was. And so I'll make sure you don't do anything too big. I can't send 10,000 flowers. You got to be something subtle, so that it's not too easy for them to guess. What I'm really trying to do there is just to get their focus, what they're looking for, to be different than their confirmation the negative view of the relationship. Accessibility and responsiveness are the building blocks of a secure attachment bond. Consequently, EFT is about the security of the attachment bond, accessibility, and the responsiveness of the partner. So it goes down to kind of like a core thing, like if you think about like attachment to a parent, is that person going to be there for me, or are they going to help me when I'm in distress? Same thing about that kind of bonding is important in couples. Can I depend on my partner to be there for me? Um, and people can have the reverse of that, like they can have attachment injuries. I work with so many affairs, and an affair is something that typically causes a pretty significant attachment injury. So the work is, how do we rebuild that? How do we get to a place where partners feel safe with one another? That's just an example. Every model has sort of a focus. Like, is it behavioral? Is it psychological? For EFT, clearly it's emotion. So emotion is a target, and the way that the model believes change happens is by tapping into emotion. So emotion is a source of information, communicates and organizes social interactions, orients and primes responses, and is a vital element in making meaning, sort of colors the event. So if you go to Disneyland and you like Disneyland, and you are having a horrible day, that's going to change your experience of it. If you go and you're excited and happy, that's going to change your experience of it. It sort of has control precedence. It sort of determines what you're able to see. Okay. So some other assumptions is that emotions basically are often individuals, family members also often lead with secondary emotions. So the emotion that they're actually feeling isn't what they're expressing to the other person. So anger, again, often leads to defensiveness or asserting. Sadness might lead to withdrawing. I mean, so forth. It's like, think about any given emotion that you might have. Is it a primary emotion or a secondary emotion? When you're able to help someone communicate directly the primary emotion, it's much more productive than if they are using a secondary confusing sort of emotion. Emotions frequently lead to adaptive actions. So, okay. EFT assumptions are also that in trying to connect, distressed couples often get caught in negative repetitive sequences of interactions where the partners express secondary emotions rather than primary emotions. I got ahead of myself. Okay, insecure attachment leads to negative interaction cycles, and in return, negative interaction cycles lead to insecure attachment. It's sort of circular in how that happens. Rigid interactions reflect and create negative absorbing emotional states. So sometimes the very thing that you want to change in another person, in ourselves, like we end up actually creating the thing that we don't want in the other person by the way that we're responding to people. Negative absorbing emotional states reflect and create rigid interactions. I guess I'm repeating a little bit, sorry. Partners are not sick or developmentally delayed. They're stuck, and there's no reason for any judgment there, because we all as humans get stuck in emotions sometimes. Most needs and desires are adaptive. Like, there's some reason that those emotions are existing, and part of our detective work is to try and figure out why. Attachment needs are universal, although their expression is culturally defined. The way we seek and obtain support is defined different in various cultures, and even in different families, and must be understood and respected. So you really do want to know your clients enough to sort of get a sense of how they make sense of their emotions. Change involves new experiences, doing something different than what they normally do, and new relationships events. This isn't exactly EFT, but like sometimes I'll say, okay, so you're noticing that every morning you're having an argument. Could you try having that argument at night? Or could you try going out into the backyard and only arguing when you're sitting on the trampoline? It really doesn't matter. you're just trying to interrupt the who, what, where, and how things are happening. Therapy is about creating these new relational experiences. Just a brief story. So I was trained in brief models, so MRI, solution focus, and so forth during my master's program. And so I then went and got my doctorate, and I was in a supervision, early supervision in my doctorate program, and someone asked me, a supervisor asked me, so what? How did the client feel about that? And I said, what does that matter? Because I really thought anything beyond successions and just focusing on the problem and solutions and such was almost unethical. So that's the week I was required to read EFT, Sue Johnson's book, and it really opened up my eyes. I realized that there's lots of different ways you can think about therapy and lots of different entry points. Like for some people, maybe entering in more of a cognitive place is helpful. For others, it's emotions. For others, it's behavior. And I also did challenge my ideas about what brief therapy is. So, for example, someone who's been ritualistically abused for 16 years, if you did therapy with them for 2 years, that might be brief therapy. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to think about therapy and about how to go about it. Be quick. Don't be too quick to judge people's theories, because yeah, there's lots of different ways people change. You can't really evaluate the validity of one model from the perspective of a different model, if that makes sense, because they have different foundations of thought about them. Okay, that's a side story.
Of Sue Johnson's plenary that I shared for you. It's the first time I'd ever heard about some of her how her spiritual beliefs influence the model. I'll be curious about what your thoughts are about that, and how they gel or don't gel with your own spiritual or existential thoughts. Um, I know you're at a Catholic university. I wonder how it fits or doesn't fit in that context. And I wonder how the spiritual or existential ideas of other theorists have influenced the development of their model. Later, we're going to get into some of the MRI and go a little bit backwards into the history of the field. But I know they had a large influence on their models from a Buddhist perspective. So yeah, just curious. Yeah, while I was looking for material for this week, I came across the video of Sue Johnson's plenary that I shared for you. It's the first time I'd ever heard about some of her how her spiritual beliefs influence the model. I'll be curious about what your thoughts are about that, and how they gel or don't gel with your own spiritual or existential thoughts. Um, I know you're at a Catholic university. I wonder how it fits or doesn't fit in that context. And I wonder how the spiritual or existential ideas of other theorists have influenced the development of their model. Later, we're going to get into some of the MRI and go a little bit backwards into the history of the field. But I know they had a large influence on their models from a Buddhist perspective. So yeah, just curious.